Coach Dunn, welcome to the off season. Let's
Postseason 2010.
Indeed. Let's talk a little bit about the 2010 season. Do a short little recap for our fans on feverbasketball.com. First of all, talk about the expectations coming into 2010. We had high expectations, but yet the East was really improved, so expectations were a little cautious.
Well, I think, Kevin, anytime you go to the finals, and in particular in 2009, when we not only went to the finals, but we went to the fifth game of the finals, we had an opportunity at home here to win a championship and at Phoenix to win a championship. Then, of course, the next year, the expectations are going to be very high. But I think it's important to always remember our expectations are always high, period. I mean, we want to win the Eastern Conference. We want to win a WNBA championship. So we really set a high bar every year. But, of course, going into this season, after our 2009 season, expectations were very high.
Okay. You didn't have a lot of starters in training camp. You had a change in point guards, which you changed after 2 games again anyway. And 5 games into the year, you added Shavonte Zellis. So things were a little bit sluggish early. You got back on track, but talk about the early season.
Well, I think it was a real unique early season, and I think it was at 2008 we didn't have a training camp with everybody here. In 2009 we did, and we saw the benefits of having the season start later. Everybody's in for training camp, and certainly that paid off for us with the type season that we had. And then now 2010, we've got 4 of our 5 starters not here for 1 day of training camp. They're overseas, they're winning championships over there. They come back, I think, maybe 14 hours before the tip-off of the first game. And that was really tough. They were tired. They were weary from playing year-round, flying. I'm sure some of them had jet lag. So it was a tough way to start the season because we opened the season with 2 really great teams in Washington and Atlanta. Look how they ended up. Atlanta ends up in the finals, and Washington wins the regular season Eastern Conference championship. So it was a tough way to start the season without those 4 in training camp. I think it took us a while for them to get rested, to get their legs back underneath them, and so that took some adjustment. And then during that period of time, we were going through the point guard situation. Our plan was for Bree to start the season and be our point guard, and then she got hurt and was out for 2 weeks. Tully took back over and kind of got into a flow there, and then we were trying to bring Bree back, so there was an adjustment period there. And then we went through a situation where we were very fortunate to be able to pick up Shavonte Zellis from Tulsa, and still thrilled about getting that young lady. She's just has tremendous potential in this league. She had a great year in Detroit in her rookie season, but during that period of time, we also lost Shea Murphy with a wrist injury, so that there was some adjustment there. But I thought we did a pretty good job considering all things that we were dealing with. The players returning, getting back into the flow and remembering the sets and remembering the plays, and then competing. I mean, it was almost like I said it jokingly, but it was really true. We were having training camp during the season and on the fly, and that's tough. But I think probably the thing that may have affected us maybe the most, other than they're getting their legs back, was just the point guard situation. It was Bree, then it was Tully, then it was Bree, then it was Tully, and hopefully this time next year that'll be settled. That Bree in January will be our starting point guard, and understand that Tully's thinking about playing 1 more year, and so we'll have to address that issue. But it's time for the team to be led by January.
The team kind of hit a hot streak. You won a big overtime game at New York, and you also won a road game at Washington. So things kind of going good at one point. Talk about how, when we hit our stride, talk about the Fever team as a whole when we hit our stride.
Well, that reminds me too, as about something that you said early in the interview. The improvement of the other teams in the East. Let's don't forget the changes that New York made. I mean, my goodness gracious, bringing in Cappie Pondexter, adding Nicole Powell, adding Taj McWilliams. Those were just huge pluses for them that really improved that team. And at the same time, Washington added Katie Smith. So we knew it was going to be a real tough challenge in the East this year. And I thought that overtime game at New York was a real plus for us. you look back on it and you say, my goodness gracious, Cappy Pondexter had 40 points, but yet you still won. And I thought that was a good sign for us. And then to go into Washington, and Washington was playing awfully well, and win there. And that was one of Brianne January's probably best games of the season. So we were seeing some of the things from her that we expect to see every game. So that gave us a lift and got us kind of on I think during that period of time we might have won 5 or 6 games in a row, and that was a good sign for us.
You know, throughout the whole year, one of our top players was Tamika Catchings. That's always the case. That's a constant. But kind of quiet until later in the year. Tamika put together one of the best seasons of her career. It was an MVP caliber season. Can you talk about the play of Tamika?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt this is by far her greatest offensive season in the hit. I mean, she's been in this league, 9 or 10 years. It seems like she's been in here 20. She's been playing forever. But when you look at her stats, she's always had a great defensive season. Consistently in the top in rebounding, consistently in the top in steals, and in her defensive intensity. She's always, either the defensive player of the year or first team all defense. That's been consistent throughout her career. What has been a little bit inconsistent is her shooting percentages from the 3 and from the 2. And this year, with all the work that she's invested, all the time and effort, she really took a huge step, I think, offensively, and showed everybody how she's grown her offensive game. I mean, she shot, I believe, 47-48% from the field. She was in the 40s from the three-point line. And that was huge for us. It was huge for her. And I think it really made her a serious contender for the MVP. Of course, at the same time, Lauren Jackson's having an outstanding season in Seattle, and it was definitely in my mind between those two. Maybe a close third was Cappy, but I thought it was going to go right down to the wire between Lauren and Tamika, based on the outstanding year that Tamika had. And I really think, looking back, with all of the things that she does defensively, she's just the total package. Had I been on the board, she would have been on the MVP if I'd been the voter.
Talk about the final stretch of the season. You get into August, the Fever loses 3 straight games, so all of a sudden confidence maybe starting to waver a little bit. You go on the road to the West Coast, and like a light bulb, things turn around.
Win
you
3
win 5
more.
straight.
Or was it 5? Yes.
Won 5 straight, and you're in first place with a week to go. What were your thoughts during that stretch?
Well, the interesting thing about this team, and I don't know, I'm still not sure, but we were inconsistent throughout the season with our energy and our effort and our sense of urgency. It seemed like some nights we would have it for 30 minutes, some nights we would have it for 35, some nights we would have it for 40, but we could never consistently have it, all that energy and effort, because we're an energy and effort team that we needed every night for 40 minutes. And I think when we were able to get it for 35, 37, almost 30, then we were very successful. And I don't know if it still had something to do with the 4 players that, just never got a break. It was really hard, I think, for them to sustain that 40 minutes every night, and they never even got 1 day break coming from the European season. Some teams can do that when 1 or 2 of their players are late coming back, but when you've got 4 starters coming back, and 3 of those 4 over 30, they needed more than anything if they could have had maybe a week off, just sit down and rest. But we didn't have that, and I sometimes thought that affected our energy level. It seemed like our tank would be empty sometimes, and we just couldn't refill our tank with energy. But we were able to, I think, sustain an effort through there. We got back in first place. We won some great games on the road out west, going into LA and going into Phoenix, both playoff teams, both very dangerous teams at home, and winning those games was a real plus for us. But it seemed like down the end, we couldn't, again, sustain that effort, that energy that we needed. We finally got healthy, except for a few little knickknacks here and there, but we just didn't seem, we could play a good, hard, intense 25 minutes, but we couldn't do it for 40 minutes, and I think that really hurt us down the stretch. And you've got a great young team like Atlanta coming on strong. You've got a Washington team that, other than Katie Smith, is very young. and you've got a New York team that is in some ways desperate. You know, they haven't been in the playoffs in, what, 3 years? And they've found some new leadership in Cappy Pondexter, and in some ways I felt like Cappy and Taj were willing that team, you know, to be the very best that they could be. So it was a great battle, I thought, in the East. I mean, I thought it, and it did. It went down to the very last game, the very last day, and I think if, you know, there was 1 or 2 games there that we let slip through our fingers, or we would have won the Eastern Conference again.